Well, good morning to you if you're in Australia. Good afternoon to you if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. Today, we're going to talk about a very exciting topic, but I want to know, do you ever feel like the world's best kept secret and maybe it's affecting your cash flow and your ability to land more clients? That's today's topic in the Next Level Influence Room. I'm Samantha Riley from SamanthaRiley.global. It's the very first time I have run an Instagram live, so now I just need to figure out how to add my co-host. First time, I always get confused with the new tech, but hopefully Melanie will join me in just a moment. And here she is. How are you, Melanie?
Hello. Excited to be in the Next Level room. Woo.
Absolutely. Day one, first week, Next Level Influence. I'm so excited that we're doing this together. Like I said, I'm Samantha Riley from SamanthaRiley.global. If you haven't met me before, I work with coaches, course creators, and experts to be the trusted thought leader that people turn to. And like I said, today we're talking about how to not be the world's best kept secret. But Melanie, I would love you to introduce yourself and say hi.
Yeah, hello everybody. Coach Melanie Benson here, and I am known as an authority amplifier for expert-based business owners, commonly what we call expertpreneurs. I host the show Amplify Your Success Podcast, and Sam and I have been having these conversations over in Clubhouse, and we're like, why are we not talking about this over on Instagram? Because it's both of one of our favorite platforms. So excited to bring the conversation over here. I think I'm moving in. I'm moving into Instagram. I'm breaking up with Clubhouse. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to miss is not having to put my lipstick on in the morning. But, you know, it was a bit exciting getting dressed up, and you know, I got to put my earrings in this morning and so we could show up here live, which is super exciting.
Nice.
So we're talking about why or how to not be the world's best kept secret. What do you see in the industry, Melanie, as a problem regarding this world's best kept secret?
You know, we were talking about this the other day, and I'm glad we're bringing it here because a lot of people, and I was just talking with another friend of mine, and she this great example. She called it Mr. Magoo marketing. And I'm like, what is Mr. Magoo marketing? She says, shh, I'm hunting clients. Shh, I'm hunting clients, right? And it's like, I'm wanting more clients, but I'm doing it so quietly that nobody can see me. Nobody can hear my message. And there's this many people I think that we both work with, they're so anxious about being seen as obnoxious, or maybe my message is too strong, or there's all these things that get in the way. Am I really an authority, or am I an imposter? Like, we have all this stuff going on in our head all the time. And so we timidly go out in the world, and people can't see us when they're searching for a solution to their problem. So that's what I've been seeing. And I loved Mr. Magoo marketing. So I'm like, I got to share it. So a little shout out to Virginia Miskis, who shared that with us today.
I've already written it down. It's so clever, and it's so
it's
true.
Awesome.
And I do you know what? Just as you're saying that, I think that there is a message that a lot of people are sharing, and I share this message too, and I know that you do, but I think it's getting a little bit confused in between us sharing the message and someone else hearing it. And I think we want to attract our dream clients. And I think that some people are actually taking this literally and just thinking that their dream client will just come out of nowhere and be attracted to them. And yes, we do want to attract our dream clients. We don't want to have pushy marketing, but we do need to be out there, and we need to be visible so we can attract them. And I think that there's a little bit of misunderstanding out there in the market, with people saying to me, but I just want my ideal clients to find me. Okay, where are you hanging out? Are you on social media? How are you sharing your message? No, they're just sitting behind their laptop and hoping that these people just magically appear. And
or they put a couple things out there, right? And they're like, why is it not working? It's like they didn't have the consistency.
Totally. So what are the ways? Actually, no, let's go back. Let's really set the foundations for this show and what we're going to be talking about each week on Next Level Influence, I think I would love to start off with, what's the difference between a thought leader, an influencer, an authority? Because you and I did have a really good conversation about this on Clubhouse, and you help your clients become a highly paid authority. So what is that piece?
Okay, before I do that though, set us up. Tell us what your definition of a thought leader is. And then I'll say what my definition of an authority is. And then we'll talk about what influence means to us. Because really, they're very different things. And I think also they become different stages, right? So
yes.
What do you think is a thought leader?
Yeah, so I see a thought leader as someone that's got innovative ideas. They have a deep knowledge in their industry. They're informed, they're experienced, they're able to capture their thoughts in a unique way that they're then able to teach other people so that they can scale those thoughts, which is very different to what I believe an influencer is. However, there is one piece that I want to add in here, and this is something that I'm really passionate about, is that a lot of people will say you can't just be a thought leader. You can't put your thought leader hat on and you're not just magically a thought leader, that you need to have that title bestowed upon you. And I'm a big believer that if you don't embrace being a thought leader first, then you can't have that title bestowed on you. So I believe that we should all think of ourselves as thought leaders, because it will help us to take our thoughts and what we're doing to the next level. I'll give you an example of this. If I'm ever working out a visual model, or I'm working on a metaphor, or I'm putting a training together, we'll have that first iteration, and then I'll ask myself, is this what a thought leader would produce? And I constantly am asking myself that, what do I need to add to this, or what do I need to do? Is this good enough? And I'm always, got new iterations of whatever I'm working on, because I always want to make sure that I'm adding to that. So if I don't embrace being a thought leader, then I can't add that layer into my work.
I love that. Okay, so can I just take it a little bit deeper? I'm curious, because this kind of got me stuck for a while, because I heard a definition of thought leadership that you have to have original thought. Do you believe you have to have original thought, or is it about having your thought and like you take something that maybe exists out there, but you're making it yours through your version of how it works in your model?
Well, so what's so interesting about this is how many original thoughts are out there, right?
Right.
We like everything is being done. I mean, there's true brand new thoughts, like the person that invented the COVID vaccine. That's truly something brand new. But in what we're doing in this coaching and, creating courses, what we know has been done. So it's about using what we've learned along the way, bringing it together with our own experience, because our own experience layers different experiences over that, and then creating it and re-delivering it or repackaging it in a different way. So we're not using the exact same thought and the way that someone else is doing it and delivering it in exactly the same way with the same message. We're taking that, probably mixing it together with a couple of other different thoughts, bringing it together with our experiences, and creating something new within what has already been done before.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts around it.
Yeah. I totally 100% agree. And I wanted to get that out, because I think sometimes people think they're not a thought leader because maybe they don't have innovative, original thoughts that they think they're supposed to have. So you asked me what my definition of an authority was. I see a trajectory that happens from I learn something, I become an expert at it. And remember, an expert doesn't mean you have to know everything. It means you're really good at it, and you are someone who other people turn to for advice on this. And then the authority, and this is where I think this is very powerful, the authority happens when you become highly visible and sought after in that particular niche or for that particular body of work. And this is a common misunderstanding. You do not have to have somebody else deem you an authority. You can actually create your authority and bring it out to the world. There are ways to, like stoke that fire, if you will. And that's one of the things that I teach people is authority is in the eyes of the beholder, but you drive the amount of people that see you that way. So that's how I see it. Would you add anything to that as an authority in your own field?
No, I think you've nailed it, as always. I think that adding on to that is, and it's the same for, what I said with the thought leader, unless we don't necessarily need to believe it at the beginning, but unless we fully embrace it, the rest of the world won't see us in that way. And I think that there is a distinction there of feeling it, like I know I'm the authority, because at the beginning you don't, you mentioned, I think it was you that just mentioned imposter syndrome a little while ago. It will come up, but it's really about embracing it. No, this is who I am, and I've got the chops to back it up.
Yeah. So now let's explore influence for a minute. And in my opinion, influence is what happens when you really own that authority in the marketplace, and other people, especially your peers, tend to turn to you for guidance or see you as kind of a trailblazer or someone who's taking the lead in the industry. It's not, to me, a lot of people get stuck like, I need to, like, I have to be an influencer and have a bazillion followers on Instagram. Okay, yeah. That's not what I'm thinking of. What I'm thinking of is, how are you inspiring action in others?
I love that, inspiring action. I think that's the thing, isn't it? Because that's what makes an influencer an influencer, is that you're able to influence other people's actions. And you don't need to have millions of followers to be able to do that. You might be an influencer in just a small area. But I think that an influencer can be an influencer on their own without necessarily being an authority or a thought leader. And a thought leader and an authority will have influence as well. So I think that influencer sort of interchanges with them all.
Yeah, when I did a podcast episode, I almost said interview, like I was going to interview myself or something. So I did a podcast episode on Amplify Your Success about this, because I found that it's confusing sometimes, and people maybe are shying away from really owning that status. And I see influence as the natural evolution out of being an authority. When you own your authority, you establish a sense of influence, and you are inspiring other people to take action, and then people turn to you and want to borrow that influence and cultivate that influence and collaborate around that influence, which is kind of what we're doing here, right?
Totally. So, what is one of your favorite tips on being visible?
Well, I'm about consistency. So the way I see this is, pick a place where your clients are, and then dominate that niche, right? Like dominate that platform in that space. So I'm a huge fan of podcasting. I think having a podcast is a quick, accelerated path to like setting yourself apart from everyone else in your field, because not everybody's going to have a podcast. And I hope I'm not like jumping ahead on your tip, but my favorite, anybody can do it at any time, is podcast guesting. Being a guest on podcasts is one of the fastest ways to create buzz and momentum as an authority, because you are sharing a message. And if you're doing a good job with a magnetic message, you should be able to create buzz and momentum around a message and get it everywhere, so everybody starts to see you at one time. So that's one of my, I guess, I don't want to call it a hack, but it's like a shortcut to getting that authority boost that we all can benefit from. And what about you, Sam?
Well, before I move on to that, I want to reiterate what you just said, because that's how I launched my personal brand, was through podcasting and guesting on other people's podcasts, because it is such an easy way to tap into other people's audiences and show up as an authority. It's just so beautiful. But before I share my tip, I want to ask you a question that I was asked the other day, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, and I'm sure I'm not.
You can.
But I would love your take on this. What's your thoughts on having your own podcast or just guesting on other people's podcasts? And I'm sure you get this question all the time.
I do, actually. I've actually written a few pieces on it because I find that there are some experts who say everybody needs a podcast, and I actually don't believe that. I think that a podcast is a business in itself. It is, yes, it's part of our marketing, it's part of our authority platform, but it is an investment of time and energy in a message. And if you don't know what you're about and what your message is, it may not be the time yet to start your own podcast. And I always say, if you're going to start your own podcast, you got to be willing to play the long game, because you're not necessarily going to go clean up a bunch of new high-end clients or get on Oprah or get on the front page of Time Magazine or anything like that in the first few months of your podcast, right? I know, the dream shattered. But a podcast takes time, and like there becomes a tipping point where you're going to start getting to that top 5, top 3, top 2%. But it was 2 years before I hit that in this podcast. Okay. And I have a lot of people listening to the podcast. It took some time to build that momentum. And so I think everybody should be guesting on podcasts, but you want to have your own podcast when you are ready to build authority and really understand your message, and you build it into your marketing strategy. That's my take on it. What would you say?
Very similar. I think that, and I often say this to my clients when they're refining their message, guesting on podcasts, I believe, is the best way to refine your message, because you're talking about it over and over. You're under a little bit of pressure. And when you're under a little bit of pressure, that's when the gold comes out. I don't know if you've ever been on a podcast, but I certainly have, where I say something and go, oh, quick, write that down. That was really good. And that doesn't happen when you're just working with, on your own behind your computer. And the other thing is that the podcast guest will ask you questions that maybe you've not had before. So it helps you to really go into the nooks and crannies of your brain and really understand what your take is, or what your unique flair is. So I think that guesting is a great idea. I do think that as the authority or as the thought leader, I personally think that you should transition having your own podcast, unless speaking isn't something that is your, I guess, zone of genius. If you're better at writing, then maybe podcasting isn't for you. But even then, I still think you can probably write your episode and run some episodes. So not necessarily, but at the same time, if you're trying to find your platform and you haven't got any platform, then podcasting could be a really great platform to get started.
Let's run this out a little bit more. And I know you're really big on podcasting and podcast guesting, as I am too. I truly believe that there is a lot of ways to create a podcast that doesn't have to look like I get on a microphone and record an episode. So I'm helping a client launch a podcast she's taking her business in a new direction. She's creating a whole new audience, and she's been really resistant to having a podcast, Sam. And so what I asked her is, I said, what are some conversations that you'd be excited about having that if you recorded those and we repurpose that into a podcast, then you would be wanting to do it? And that changed her perspective. And I also said, what are the conversations you would have wanted to listen to when you were your ideal client? Yeah. And so we're going to have her record them and do YouTube Live, which is really hot right now. And then our marketing team is taking them and repurposing them into her podcast. Because the idea of just talking wasn't exciting her, but when she got to have a conversation, it changed everything. So that's one of the things I say is, if you're like, should I not? What should I do? Think about a conversation you wish you could listen to, or a conversation that you can't wait to have now.
Love that. I love that. And I think that this is where the strategy becomes so important. And I know that this is something that you do. You just mentioned that, and it's something I do. It's not just start a podcast for the sake of starting a podcast. It's how does it fit within your suite of products? How does it fit with the, how your ideal or your dream client runs their day? How does it fit in your marketing? There's so many different ways. You might want a strategy where you want to meet influencers in your industry. Your strategy might not actually be your listeners as the number one top priority. That number one top priority might be to meet with other influencers or leaders in your industry. So don't think that there's only one strategy. It might be to meet collaboration partners. It might be for your listeners and to attract your dream clients. There's so many different ways. And I know one of the podcasts that I did, which we're no longer running, Business Geeks podcast, there was 3 of us. So to get 3 people each week to do recording and all of the hassle and, working out the topics was pretty tricky. So we did that as a Facebook Live. Probably didn't come across as a podcast as well because there was interaction with the people, but we wanted something that was just super, super simple. And that strategy worked really well for me because I met a lot of people through that. I could see the people that were coming on the live and were commenting each week, so I knew exactly who to reach out to. So sometimes the strategy isn't actually the end result, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And I think this is part of establishing yourself in the market and recognizing that to be out of best kept secret mode and into I'm a go-to authority and I'm a thought leader in my industry, we have to look at the ancillary benefits of the way we're visible. So I have found that sometimes the real gold comes from the doing versus the outcome. So about 3 weeks ago, I did a podcast episode with a friend of mine, and I've been on his podcast like 7 times. I've spoken at all his events, and so I was like, okay, well, what could we possibly talk about that we haven't already covered, right? But I love him, and I love talking about mindset. He wanted me to come and talk about the mindset of business growth. Within days of it hitting his actual podcast, so he took the Facebook Live and repurposed it, I had someone binging all of my content on my website, and I kept seeing him pop up like, this person just subscribed to this person just opted in for this. And then he landed on my calendar. He had binged like 10 of my podcast episodes and then immediately signed up in one of my VIP packages. And I thought, this is an ancillary benefit, okay? So when we're doing these guest spots, we don't know what's going to come out of it. And it's very rarely in that moment someone goes, hey, I'm commenting here because I want something. They're going to catch up on things later, and that's when they take action. And those are the golden nuggets. That's just one of like 100. But these are the kinds of golden nuggets if we really stay present to, I do the thing that showcases my authority, my business superpower, and I do it consistently, then we're creating this constant visibility in the market. And when people go looking, they see you everywhere. And that gives you that borrowed sense of authority. That was just coming through for me.
Totally. And I just, with that, when you say they see you everywhere, and this I think is going to lead into what my number one tip is that when people see you everywhere, it doesn't necessarily mean you're everywhere. Not all of us have the content team that Gary Vee has. We don't have 50 people, behind us chopping up our videos and creating our content. We don't have people following us around with a camera. So we actually can't be everywhere. And I think the distinction that's really important to know is that we need to be everywhere in their world, not everywhere. I think that's a really important distinction to make.
I need a bell. Ding, ding, ding. That was a key takeaway right there. That is so important, is because it eliminates the overwhelm, and it causes people to have that like, oh my gosh, like they're everywhere. I really probably need to check this person out. But you're not everywhere. You're everywhere your clients are. Love that distinction so much. Okay, so was that your tip, or do you have a tip you want to leave us with?
That my tip is that you do need to be creating content where your ideal clients are. So you need to know who that ideal client is, and you need to know where they're hanging out or where they're likely to hang out. I know that my ideal client is not on Snapchat. So there's no point going there. I'm not interested in doing anything on Snapchat. That's not where my ideal clients are. But once you have figured out where your ideal clients are, you need to really commit consistently to those platforms and just 100% commit and spend your time there, because that's when your ideal client will say you're everywhere. And exactly like you just said before, Melanie, you can see when there's someone new that's in your world and all of a sudden they start liking all of your posts, or they start commenting on a whole heap of your posts, and all of a sudden you can watch them sort of going here, and then they'll download this, and then they'll go listen to this, and then they'll comment on this, and it makes it very easy then to reach out and start a conversation in a very non-spammy way, because then we're saying, hey, you're not just an ideal client that has no face and no name now. Now you're a person that potentially is wanting some help. And now you can reach out and say, hey, how are you? I see you. I acknowledge you. How can I help? And you can open up that conversation very easily.
I think a lot of people are kind of conflicted about the messaging component on social media and reaching out. And I think if you want to be a go-to authority, you don't have to do all these things yourself, but I think it's important to remember the messaging is where these vague, dormant leads become real connections that can take action and go to a next step with you. But we have to take ownership of the step. Like, we have to be the ones that oftentimes move forward. Not everybody's going to be like the client I was mentioning before, who just binged everything, is like, I'm in, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to create a space for someone to say, you know what, I think I do want more. And I do a lot of different ways to test that and move people into a conversation, but we have to own that. Like, we can't wait for it to happen. And it goes back to the beginning, this idea of attracting clients. What I was thinking of, and I didn't mention it then, is this idea that sometimes when we talk about client attraction, I think the law of attraction gets confusing. And we think law of attraction, client attraction. So if I envision it, it'll come. No, there is a very powerful part of the law of attraction that plays out here too. And that is, we have to have the components and the factors and take action. We have to own the movement, but we have to have the right components so that people can see us. They resonate with our message. It feels relevant and desirable, and they know there's something there for them. So I was just thinking about that earlier, how so many people get confused.
Totally. Can I add another layer to that? Because I think the law of attraction is all about energy, right? And I think that what we need to remember as the authority or as the thought leader or the influencer, whatever hat you want to wear, is that energetically you need to be doing something that's in alignment with yourself. And this is something I'm very passionate about. If you're, actually, and we won't dive into this today at all, but, in human design, and I do a lot in human design, when you're a certain type or when you've got certain centers that are open, it can be energetically, it can push people away if you're not in alignment with how you're sharing your message. So you might see people very much saying, hey, this is what I've got and this is where I'm going, and really like initiating that conversation. It might not work for you. If it doesn't feel right, chances are it's not the way that you should be sharing your message. So you do need to really get into alignment with what feels good for you. And the way that you speak with people, because maybe your type, your human design type, is that you need to wait for the invitation, or maybe it's that you need to respond, or maybe that's you need to initiate. So I think that even without going down that rabbit hole today, just taking the takeaway of make sure it feels in alignment with what feels good to you, and not to be confused with, that makes me afraid and I'm scared to do that, and that feels uncomfortable, because that's a completely different conversation again.
All right, we're going to have to do a whole segment on human design, because you've opened the vortex up, and people are going to be like, human what? Like, how do I do this? So I'm very excited, by the way, for the workshop you're going to do for my Amplify Mastermind. They are so jazzed about it. Okay, so
me too.
Can we do a segment on here? Can we put it on the schedule? Because I know as people are watching this, they're going to be like, how do I learn about human design? So we'll talk about it. We'll put it in the
definitely
schedule.
talk about that.
Okay.
Definitely talk about that. But I know, Melanie, that you've been talking about how to be a highly paid authority, and I know that you've got a free resource that's got some really awesome tips on it. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is, if you're watching this on Instagram or you're catching this later on one of the ways we'll share this out in the market in a bigger way. It's called How to Become a Highly Paid Authority by Transforming Your Wisdom into Wealth. And there are 8 key factors that I teach people that if you get these factors in place, it allows you to be consistently visible with a relevant, powerful message that turns you into a client magnet. And then amplify it so that you're growing the reach and the income from it. And that's really what we want. We want to be able to be paid well for all of this wisdom and this knowledge that we've worked so hard for. So you can find that at authorityamplifiers.com, or wherever you're catching up on this session today. You can find it in my bio. That would be something I would start with. And while we're talking about Instagram, since we're starting this conversation on Instagram, if you know Sam and you don't know me, let's make sure we stay connected, Coach Melanie Benson. And if you're connected to me and you don't know Sam, make sure you press on Sam's face here or follow through her link to the Sam Riley, because we're going to be going live every week at 4 p.m. on Tuesdays, and we want to make sure you don't miss it. So Sam, what would you say if somebody wants to take this journey of becoming a thought leader, or they really resonated today with what you're talking about? What's a first step they could take with you and get to know your work better?
So, well, actually, you can head to my, connect with me on Instagram at the Sam Riley, like you just mentioned, or head over to my website at samanthariley.global. But today, you and I did mention podcast guesting is a really great way to build your authority. And I've got a free resource called the Podcast Guest Advantage, which is the 5-step framework to get booked on more podcasts. Now, the reason I wrote this is because most people only use 2 of these steps, and there's actually 5 steps to go through to really make sure that you get it booked as many times as possible. So if you just DM me on Instagram, the word grow, I'll send that podcast guest advantage to you. No opt-in or anything, and I'll just shoot it through to you.
Nice. I love that. I'm going to have to learn how to do that. Maybe your genies can teach me.
Yeah. My genies are so good.
Your genies are the bomb. I love it so much. All right. So as you're listening in, if you're joining us here live on Instagram, we want to hear what's on your mind. Where are you becoming a bottleneck? What are the challenges you're facing? And what are the goals you want to reach? We love to make sure we're talking about the topics that are really relevant to you right now. So feel free to comment or shoot either one of us a DM and say, oh my gosh, could you guys talk about this or that? Or if you've seen one of our posts, you're like, expand, tell me more. We want to know what's on your mind and what you want from us. So Sam, I love that we're doing this. I can't wait for next week. And do we know what we're talking about next week yet? Or are we going to surprise everybody?
We are going to have to surprise people because I haven't got it in front of me.
We might be talking about how to get more done.
We're going to talk about how to get more done, and that's really important. So there we go. I did find it. How to get more done, how to be more productive. Absolutely, absolutely. So if you're loving these tips and you want to stay connected, please follow Coach Melanie Benson or myself, the Sam Riley. We definitely want to make sure that we're answering your questions every week in this new show, Next Level Influence. Of course, tag a friend if you know that they would get value from this episode. Share it out, and please, if you do share it out, tag us. We would love to say hi and know what you got out of today's episode.
Yeah, and we want to follow you back. So that's the best way to get us on your radar. So
absolutely.
All right, Sam,
awesome.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us live today for our first edition. We'll look forward to seeing you next week as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks, Melanie.